tell you a tale, a chilling tale of horror, of a shadow that crept into the dreams of the unsuspecting. This is the story of Elm Street and a man named Freddy Krueger. It begins with a young girl named Tina Gray, a high schooler with her whole life ahead of her. One night, Tina found herself in the middle of a dark and twisted boiler room, its pipes hissing steam and its walls coated in grime. There, she was hunted by a figure, a man with a face burned beyond recognition, a tattered fedora perched on his head, and a glove on one hand with knives for fingers. He scraped those blades along the walls, sending an eerie screech through the air. Just as the man lunged at her, Tina woke up drenched in sweat. But the terror wasn't over. Her nightgown bore slashes, just like the ones from her nightmare. Tina was scared, and rightly so. The next day, she told her best friend, Nancy Thompson, and Nancy's boyfriend, Glenn Lance, about the dream. They tried to brush it off, saying it was just a bad dream. But Tina wasn't convinced. That night, with her mother out of town, Tina's boyfriend, Rod Lane, stayed over to keep her company. But the shadows had other plans. When Tina fell asleep, the man returned. Freddy Krueger, his name was. He chased her, taunted her, and finally, he killed her. In the real world, Rod could only watch in horror as Tina's body was lifted into the air, slashed by an invisible force. Blood painted the room, and Tina was gone. Rod panicked and fled, which made him look guilty of her murder. Nancy, poor Nancy, was devastated by her friend's death. The police, led by Nancy's father, Lieutenant Donald Thompson, arrested Rod. But even in the safety of a jail cell, Freddy wasn't done. That night, as Rod slept, Freddy crept into his dreams. With a cruel laugh, he wrapped Rod's bedsheet around his neck and hung him. When the police found Rod's body, it looked like a suicide, but Nancy knew better. Nancy began having nightmares of her own. Freddy was there, with his burnt skin and razor glove, laughing and chasing her. During one nightmare, she burned her arm on a hot pipe. When she woke up, the burn was still there. That's when Nancy realized whatever happened in the dream world was real. She tried to warn her friends, but they didn't believe her. Freddy's grip was tightening. Nancy's mother, Marge, finally revealed the truth. Years ago, Freddy Krueger had been a child murderer in their town. He preyed on the kids of Elm Street, but when the law failed to punish him, the parents took justice into their own hands. They burned him alive, thinking that was the end of him. But Freddy's spirit was too vengeful to stay gone. He returned, haunting the dreams of their children, seeking revenge. Nancy knew she had to stop Freddy. She began researching dreams, learning all she could about how to fight him. She devised a plan. If she could grab Freddy in her dream and wake up, she could pull him into the real world where he would be vulnerable. But Freddy wasn't going to let her win easily. Glenn, Nancy's boyfriend, became his next victim. In one of the most gruesome scenes, Freddy pulled Glenn into his bed, and a geyser of blood erupted, covering the room. Alone and desperate, Nancy set her trap. She rigged her house with booby traps and prepared herself for a final confrontation. When she fell asleep, she faced Freddy in his boiler room. She taunted him, luring him closer. Just as he lunged, she grabbed him and woke up. Freddy was pulled into the real world, disoriented and furious. Nancy's traps worked. She set Freddy on fire, locking him in the basement. But Freddy was no ordinary man. He recovered quickly and came after her again. That's when Nancy had an epiphany. Freddy thrived on fear. Without it, he was powerless. Summoning all her courage, Nancy turned her back on him. refusing to give him the satisfaction of her fear. Freddy screamed in rage and disintegrated into nothingness. The nightmare seemed over. Nancy stepped outside, greeted by a sunny morning and her friends, alive and well. But happiness was fleeting. In a chilling twist, Nancy's mother was pulled through the door's window by Freddy's clawed hand. Nancy found herself trapped in a car with Freddy's colors on its roof, and the vehicle drove off uncontrollably. The story ended with a question. Was Freddy truly gone? Or was he still lurking, waiting for his next victim? So, there it is, the tale of a nightmare on Elm Street. It's a story of guilt, vengeance, and the thin line between dreams and reality. Freddy Krueger's name became legend, a shadow that haunts the corners of our minds. And as you drift off to sleep tonight, remember, he might be waiting for you too.